Hey everyone, my name is Pranay Parikh. I'm the president and co-founder of Ascent Equity Group, and we're a private real estate company that helps people, especially medical professionals, invest in real estate without being a landlord. So today I want to talk to you about preferred equity. These days we're seeing more and more preferred equity in capital stacks, which I'll explain in a second. And so it's really important that you know and understand what you're investing in. So one of the big things to understand when investing in preferred equity is called the capital stack. And it sounds a little complicated, but the capital stack is something really simple that all of us intuitively have grown to learn. So a capital stack, so imagine your house that you had bought. The capital stack for your house would look like this. It would have debt, right? Also called senior debt. And I'll explain why it says senior in a second, at about 80%, right? And down here, it has to equal 100%, right? And so the rest of it is your down payment. That's 20%, right? So it equals 100%. And what we call this is equity, right? So this is really simple, right? So this number, always 100, but this can vary, right? So for example, in my house, I put a down payment of 15%. So that means the loan is for 85%, and my equity in the property is 15%, right? And now if the value of the property increases, I actually get to enjoy that, right? So then say, right, this is 100%. But say I bought this at $1 million, and now it's worth 1.5 million. So that means my 15% is actually worth a lot more because I own more equity in the deal, right? So when you buy apartment complexes or any other real estate, that's typically what you'll have, right? So if you have an agency loan, right? Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, they will only give you up to 65% of the senior loan. And it's called senior because there could be other loans, but the senior gets paid first, right? So it goes order by priority. So it'll be senior loan and then maybe junior loan, like a mezzanine loan. And what that means is just a second loan. So when it comes time to get paid, they get paid after the senior loan. And then this has to be 35%, right? Because we need to equal 100%. And this is equity. So this is why one of the many reasons that you're seeing so few deals that are being done, because people who are buying real estate have to bring so much more to the table. So for, let's say, a $10 million property, the loan will be $6.5 million, and then the equity will be $3.5 million. Compared to before, where it'd be $8 million from the loan, and then $2 million. So this is almost double, right? Almost double money that you have to bring to the table. But you also typically, if you're using agency debt, they're not going to pay for your capital expense or your renovation money, right? So you have to bring in, say, another $1 million or so. So because this number has gone so much, and we're in a time when people don't want to invest or are scared to invest, there's been something that they've been able to add. So preferred equity, it's not a new asset class, but we're starting to see it more. So compared to this loan, for example, maybe you bring in, so you will have, right, 65% from senior debt, from agency. And this is, when I talk about senior debt, I'm talking about agency. Agency is Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. And the reason that people want to do this is because it's fixed, it's long-term. So fixed meaning the interest rate doesn't go up. Long-term, 5 years or more. And the rates are the best, right? But they're only willing to give you a certain amount of leverage, up to 65-ish%. So if I want to get my equity, if the money that I have to bring to the table to be around 20%, right? Like before, that means I have to add something else, right? And what that is called preferred equity. Or you could add in another loan, but a lot of people are going with preferred equity. And as you can see, it kind of sits in the middle, right? It kind of sits in the middle of debt and equity. So as we'll talk about in a second, the pros and cons are kind of in the middle of both debt and preferred equity. So let's talk about debt first, right? So debt, right? Pros and cons. Debt has to get paid every month, monthly payments, right? If you don't, you can take over the property, rights to take over the property. But typically the returns are single digits, right? For example, the property we're buying right now, we're getting a 6% interest rate, right? So many of us don't get super excited about a 6% return per year that's annualized. But it's extremely low risk, right? Because there's so much money behind you to get paid, right? So in our capital stack, right, 65% debt, 15% pref, 20% equity. So if, say, worst case scenario, we have to take over this property, we're getting it for a 35% discount, right? And because we've taken so much risk off the table, that's the added benefit. The downside is debt is taxed at marginal rate. So you're paying a lot of, lower returns, high tax, but also low risk, right? So then let's skip pref for now. You have common equity, right? This is where most of us invest, right? So we'll talk about equity in terms of real estate. You get, low to mid-teens returns, right? Great tax, right? Great tax advantage, right? Because of depreciation. You higher risk though, right? Higher risk. So in terms of risk, when you're looking at this capital stack, risk goes up, but also returns go up, right? So usually risk and reward go hand in hand, right? So higher risk, higher returns, right? Higher returns. But last to get paid, right? Debt is first to get paid. Equity is last to get paid. Last to get paid. Right? You get upside. So debt, the most debt can get is your original loan, right? Plus, let's say 6% or whatever. That's the max upside. So you're capped. Here, unlimited upside. This is why most of us invest, right? So unlimited upside. Let's see. And because, right, so any additional returns go to us, right? As for the example that I mentioned in my house that went from 1 to 1.5 million, that additional value is all captured by the equity. So now you have pref, which is a mix of debt and common equity, right? So here you'll get a preferred return, right, on the equity. But it really only gets paid after both the pref and the equity. So, sometimes distributions are 0 or none. Here, they get paid. So after senior gets paid, second in line. And there's something called current pay. And depending on the preferred equity terms, if they don't get paid this, they can take over the property, right? So then if they take over the property, they're still getting it for a 20% discount, which is great, right? So the current pay is usually anywhere from, let's say, 4 to 8%. So that's pretty good because, cash on cash on an equity deal these days, right? Because everyone else has to get paid, I've seen maybe 3 to 5%. So here they're saying, even upwards of 10% I've seen. Maybe 6 to 10. 6 to 10. So they're saying here that if they don't get paid that, they can take the property back. That's pretty cool. And then they'll have something called accrual, which means that this has to get paid by the end. So they'll have an all-in here of maybe 14%, 14 to 18%. So this is what they have to pay every year, annual. And this is what they have to pay annual at the end. And remember, all of this has to get paid before the equity gets paid. Now, the downside is capped upside. So when I see 14 to 18%, whatever that number is, that's what the upside is capped off. So here's something to look at if you're common equity, right? You want your IRR to be higher, projected IRR, than the pref, right? So if this, say, is a 14 IRR, and here I'm projecting maybe a 16, every dollar of pref actually increases my returns because that extra 2%, right, the delta goes to the common equity, right? The downside for common equity is the more pref, the less cash flow, right? Because this number is much higher than the projected cash flow on the property, right? So depending on what type of investor you are, you either want there to be, if you're a cash flow investor, you want there to be as little pref as possible. But if you're more of an IRR equity multiple type of investor, then you actually are happy with pref, right? Now, something to really look for in terms of the pref is last dollar, right? So one deal I saw had a $56 million, let's use an even number, $50 million purchase price. Had a 70% LTV. So LTV is your loan amount divided by value. So if a property is worth, let's say, 50 million, or if a property is worth 100 million, and the loan is the loan is 50 million, it's 50% LTV, right? So the value was 50 million, and they got a 70% LTV, right? So $35 million loan, which is great, right? 70% LTV is pretty good. We like that. Yeah, we like to see 70% or lower. However, they got an extra 10 million of pref. So, as an LP, when I consider LTV, I want to make sure that what kind of money is in front of me. So that means there's $45 million, right? 35 plus 10 that gets paid before me. Right? So the actual LTV right? Here it's 70% LTV. But if you include the pref, the actual LTV is like 90%. So obviously we didn't invest in this deal. But what we like to see is all in, the last dollar, including the pref, to be about 70%. Last dollar, LTV. So for that $50 million property, it would say, let's say we got $50 million property and $30 million loan. Then maybe $5 million in pref, if we did pref at all. Right? So then 35 million divided by 50, 70% LTV. So that's kind of a quick run through of pref equity. The LTV part is really, really important. And attached to this, or click the link below, or above, it's linked somewhere around here. We have a glossary. If you didn't understand some of the words, or if you need a refresher, I promise pretty much everything that I have seen in pref equity is on there, like DSCR, super important, drag to market, super important. I just didn't have time for this primer to go through literally everything in pref equity. But there's also a bunch of case studies as well. And if you guys are interested, please let me know. I'm happy to go through more detail of pref equity. But this is just a pref equity 101 because I've seen a lot of people get into it for promised guaranteed returns. You know, this current pace sounds great, but you also got to make sure that you're in a protected place in the capital stack. So for example, we want to be, 70% LTV. We want there to be a lot of common equity. This number, the bigger it is, right? It's a cushion. It's a cushion that in case values go down, in case cash flow suffers, the bigger the common equity in front of you or behind you to get paid, higher on the capital stack, it means it just gives you a buffer. And this calculation is something that I've seen not many people do. But if you're in a preferred equity, because your upside is capped, you need to make sure that you're very, very protected, just like the debt people do, right? They really make sure there's so much money above them or behind them to get paid that they know that their returns is almost guaranteed. Or if they have to take over the property, that they're getting it for such a big discount. You have to really think like debt and equity, which is why we actually like preferred equity and we do a lot of preferred equity deals. So if you're interested, please reach out and chat soon. Bye.